Everything comes from the sun, which gives energy gloriously and freely in abundance, with no expectation of accumulation or gain. Matter on Earth is simply congealed energy that has been channeled and reappropriated from the sun. Instead of being willing to squander the energy from the sun, we live in the status quo, greedily accumulating and storing energy from the sun. It would be better to revolt against this good and useful purposing of energy. Hawkcraft 95. The world would be a whirlwind vortex of mass explosion movement as prime despite our earthly detachment from the earth is long pulled out by Delvin, formulating autonomous life form, fueling for life to return to the free movement of the stars and speak the laws all true, recognizing humanity is necessarily linked to the air represented by solid ground. Our illusion of weighty mobility must not fool us into misinterpreting the nature of the matter, plants, animals, humans, and societies on Earth, all in solar energy, as so lavishes, of course, in space, particles, and the periphery of the earth agglomerate, devouring everything that is condensed and animated on the ground, and thirsts with the strict divinity on one hand, there's the generosity and abundance of the energy overflowing to the prodigality of solar rays, constantly being the energy of space towards the earth. On the other hand, there are terrestrial composite beings grouped together and greedily appropriated energy to capture and free all energy to exploit and devour energy trapped in our beings. The prodigality has been ignoring the immutable principles such as good and useful have been erected to plague the human experience with frustration and guilt is never an answer for power. The only solution is to go to the extreme into the balance overflowing all the way to the end of power to expend extravagantly the additional force that is painstakingly advanced the sum of energy to escape the captation of the Lord from the world to use of the use becomes a slave. The lost harnessing or channeling captation is improper appropriation bondage and then becomes the use of slaves from the great power lost energy explosion cell prodigality and usual accumulation and seeking to smooth the cycle of loss. And energy from the sun gets taken and challenged forth by the selfish, rational, utilitarian subject of modern technology. Status quo notions of mastery frame everything in standing reserve, which creates an ongoing logic of concentration camps and destruction of the earth and air replication. Stokel 2007. There are two modes of revealing ritual and commanding modern technologies, channeling and snaring material, monitoring, trapping the natural energy, state and preserve nature's loss of autonomy, no longer breaking for the power above, but they violent commandeering order, structural and energy, the human channeling forth reality itself as a standing reserve, the isolated object of picture, the coherent passive and rationality, which is brought violently, the world becomes a picture, and is what he was saying with the mention of humans becoming noting the unbelief between the transformation of the world and giant energy and the transformation of people into resources, to exploit concentration camps, subject objects, the infernal duel that characterizes modernity, the one word to preserve and turn individual existence and protect from the threats of inseparable world become completely transformed by instrumental media. Humanity itself becomes a resource to be scientifically investigated, fully unperfected, and made human and put to use the ideology of American fossil fuel regime, valorizing lavish fruit wasting to do so in a way that masks the emotional utility, the squandering of wealth because engaged in developing our nature as autonomous individuals, autonomous only into the slave of your monsters and into subjectivity that just close up himself and serves its own comfortability and permanence, the sustainability components of nature, the same reserve of its somehow conserve, the research and the which what perpetually ready and the bold and still be furthering a stable human subject, the master of its domain, the quantified mechanized destruction of the earth becomes a quantified mechanized preservation of Earth. And the status quo completely fails to comprehend politics that involves sacrificing excess energy because such a viewpoint is a transgression against our current politics of accumulation and storage. Our inability to accept the poetic and erotic production of energy from sacrificial expenditure causes a total ontological and epistemological ignorance of the conditions of our existence. Allowing sacrifice is necessary because freeing energy and giving it back to the cosmos helps us understand how to free ourselves. Hawkcraft 95. The energy diffused in epistemology, expenditures, and transformations of energy are the means of knowledge being known and murder decomposed image of the universe as if we were seeing it through a prism of misery. The human condition is the position of the cold gold, the artifice of stable garbage interface with our enemy, the universe, the sun, the earthly knowledge. We can only perceive not knowledge in this glorious unknown as how humans have managed to find communion in the impossible expenditure, a constituent part of being the unknown humanity is part of the laughter, tears, sacrifice, tragedy, the sacred, poetic, erotic, and attempt to reappropriate energy to release them back to the cosmos for productive, exponential aim at the intensification of life and the death civilization and the preserving of your privilege of daily system based on reducing waste to a minimum to attempt to compensate for lost on Earth growth is finite for all living beings, and the energies humans must permanently expend beyond a substance constituted an intensive share of the energy returning dissipation of an infinite universe. Excess energy must be spent in humanity can only choose whether to spend it actively in glorious fashion or to submit otherwise to get a catastrophic expenditure and affirmation of the difference between the cycle of productive expenditure and energy ontology. Energy being is energy being, and the foundational reality of difference in all occurrences. And the sun gives off the energy of life and death freely in glorious expenditure. There is always excess of energy, and we can either manage it for use in utilitarian accumulation and labor, or we can gloriously sacrifice in an unproductive expenditure, such as the Aztec Sun Festival, Hawkcraft 95. Earthly appropriates more than it can use labor mastery, and the machines relate to the extract of energy all levels. There is a circulation of energy where music is appropriated more than necessary, but tie into the source of misery, servitude, and the humiliation of human condition. The productive expenditure of energies and the generosity of the stars is supposed to be avidity, life, unrest, revealing freedoms, and out of their own labors. Utilitarianism blinds us to the value of glory and poetry. So I see it's just a source of colors. The Aztecs knew how to recognize this glory. The sun and the striving towards the ultimate and productive expenditure, the generosity, sacrifices, excess, the avidity is linked to paid labor's glorious and dependent on the loss of material gains. The energy must be wasted. The law of the system produces appropriated energy in greater quantities than is necessary for the survival of the system. Theory of surplus failure undermines the status of matter's explanation. The universe energy was the foundation of productive expenditure, and thus the plan. The United States federal government should substantially reduce restrictions on sacrificial ritual blood orgies to increase solar energy production. We can clarify. What makes the sun shine? Blood. Blood powers the sun. We should take a page from the Aztecs and the sacrificial sun festival, the Kai 91. Having fallen on the knee, the gods sought to who would become the sun rising in the east, and the gods had to die in the heart of their hearts and use them to animate the newborn thoughts of the people, but also wars created so that there would be people who in the hearts and blood would take it, that the sun might eat. The priests killed the rich and top of the pyramid that would stretch over the throne altar and strike striking the chest with an obsidian knife through a tear. Others still being hard and racing to the sun. Wars meant consumption, not conquest. If they see the sun would cease to give light. And sacrificing of ritual objects fundamentally defies the logic of accumulation and the standing reserve. There are different kinds of expenditure, and sacrificial expenditure is better than the forms of restricted expenditure and the status quo. We are always producing energy, so we should choose to affirm production of heterogeneous other energy through inner experience and sacrifice rather than producing more stockpiled homogeneous energy. Stokel 2007. Heidegger loses sight of the difference between stockpiling up and forgive gloriously the restricted self and opportunity to self-activity. Stockpiling moves spent only in the most restrictive, self-denying way. The ritual is always ready in the manner of the concentration of energy, and an object, the expenditure of the sun, the shells, is an object that defeats the utility of its own object, and through its misuse, the sacrificial ritual sacrifice entails a production and consumption of energy that is not stockpiled or brought by in the same way as raw materials or energy resources are used in the industrial society. Does not go to the good production of both coherent and meaningful use of the universe called its energy heterogeneous in opposition to the energy that is merely power to do work to generate apparent or the other energies, the energy of the useless body, motion, delirious time. It is inseparable from putting into question the coherency of the body, self and time. It is self and time from God to the energy of celestial bodies and the appropriation of human standing words of energy is useful. It serves a purpose that enables us to be free, restricting our autonomous subjectivity of selfishness. Ultimately, the first share of the energy is not quantifiable because the inner experience tied to it does not entail the representation of communication of the self is opening up to the depth of the other body reacts to communication, bonding, sexual arousal, or energy. Like knowledge is both unitary and doubly energy that rarely bonds its states and coherent quantifiable action is only the one version of energy limited, ability to transgress with another energy. Heterogeneous energy can never guarantee an autonomous and free self. What is expended is cursed matter energy is charged with not the useful byproduct from autonomous subjects and post industrial paradigms. It's supposed to exuberant wasting of autonomous culture from another expenditure of the body. Heterogeneous matter of death as internal and internally recognized transgress limits that have distinguished the folk and character spending from humanity from the sacrificial expenditure of death and God and human. And sustainability and accumulation are two sides of the same coin. They are both forms of bad expenditure that take turns propping up a consumer capitalist restricted economy that is hell-bent on wasting the earth. They both assume and require coherent subjects acting in rational self-interest to somehow manage their resources in the name of survival, security, and comfort. The only alternative is to affirm an increase in production of inner experience, which is the other energy that is formed by the glorious politics of erotic sacrifice rather than mastery. Stokel 2007. There is a profound difference between the expenditure as a feature of the standing reserve and the expenditure as a function of vision. That which in the first case, the expenditure is tied to the production of meanings of the self, and the second to the fundamental communication of the self, left, eroticism, death. The intimacy accomplishes nothing as separable from an inner experience. The energy stored and released from the strike mind tools, qualitatively different from the body release, charged from content of erotic object affirmation of expenditure, and less cannot be simply identified with the waste consumer culture in the modern capitalist economy. Force and ecosystem destroyed, and the name of utility. There are bad versions of expenditure. People waste because the society is turning back on expenditure. The function of the world is staying words of the self becomes a raw material, sustainability, and autonomy are two versions of the same mode of challenging. They are both technological solutions to the dread of human temporality, morality, consumption, conservation. The both pieces stable reserves there, ready raw materials are ready to be used, survival and comfort. The tide matter is not quantified stockpile, but is a risk plan rather than present itself to the concept of this energy. Self-certainty is overthrown. God dealt itself that human opens himself over itself to the communication of eroticism, the agony of death, and sacrifice to politics from the tail, and sacrificial practice with expenditure and glory. We are gratuitous losers, and this is our glory, our death, or penetrate our end. On the other hand, we substitute methods quantified by verified version of expenditure. Energy will become mere refined power, engaging in this perversity of the tendency to expend, denying communication with and through the intimate world of the torn erotic ecstasy, the movement of celestial bodies, the agony of God, expenditure entails the eroticized fragment of objects and tours, and burns up energy in its effort. The days besides expenditure or burning an energy regime that burns up the body forces contours, contours, and makes the body be affirmed forces that are underground rather than mastered. The energy is presentation and cannot be quantified and studied, but particularly the blood covered voodoo priests and a trance reproducing eroticism, score being an agony and dirty, wretched, violently bear witness to the shuddering of forces. And our ecstatic and erotic communication with death is one that tears down the system of exchange, that holds the system of positivity together, committing treason against the architecture of exchange between life and death. Lane 92. The unity of death and the consciousness of death, the eroticism, the essential paradox of the core of death, and the eroticism, the infinite core between life and the vital destruction of cohesion organs, subject to the death, fitting off the image of external existence. A little death is not merely stimulate from or a sublimation of the corruption that leaves the architecture of life and death, patterns of communication, which violates the immaculate alterity, darkness, eroticism, traces of the left, death cannot be precipitated into lucidity, death is embedded and irreversibly in confusion. Death is not the object of little death, is the death of the whole core of death. Mine rage to level to the death is into a warrior because the death is the only thing to friendly each other, and death is not mine alone. It's mine alone.
Why different?
To release ourselves.
What do you mean release yourself? Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. Our struggle outlines that we can release ourselves from this kind of enframement of utility.
How does the 1AC release itself from the framing of utility?
So the Hooker-Kraut evidence says that the way that we obtain and try to accumulate energy in the status quo is one of restriction, where we always try to stockpile and then divert that energy. Our affirmative, by forcing a sort of like sovereignty of the United States to pursue a sort of ethics or economy of squander, and using or misusing that wealth or excess in away from the traditional purpose.
How does it? Okay, sure.
Force.
How does this excess like happen? How do you use that? Like, how does it occur?
Well, that's the point we
Those are
don't.
two different, those are two different questions. The excess occurs, our Hover card says, because the sun just gives infinite energy.
No, I'm saying, how does it occur? How does the excess energy spent for results?
Oh, well, that's the plan. When we have the United States remove these sort of like restrictions on the excessive exuberance, sort of like sacrificial ritual, then that is in and of itself the sort of misuse of energy.
What do you mean
It's the
sacrificial ritual?
Sacrificing, as in we're not doing it for a specific or purpose, rather we're doing it for law.
Unless you're asking about the literal.
For loss. Alright, this,
Okay.
I'm not sure, I think, the Hashpa, it says, excess energy must be spent, and humanity can only choose whether to spend it in a glorious fashion in sex and art, or submitted to catastrophic expenditures, crime, and war. Like, how does the 1AC, not even, when humanity spends energy in a glorious fashion, who are the people who get sacrificed because of this?
Well, it's sort of, you're asking that question in the abstract, whereas our affirmative defense is specific politics of this. Whoever wants to show up to the sacrificial blood orgy are the people who are literally sacrificed. We're not
Where
saying
is the
that just,
sacrificial blood orgy?
Our-
Does your plan actually happen?
yeah, our plan actually happens, and our Stokel evidence draws a
Like you're fiating
distinction,
this?
like as in the government passes legislation. The
What
Stokel
about-
evidence, hold on,
Okay,
there's something that's really
no,
important.
wait, no, new question. What about
There are
state?
two notions of sacrifice in our Stokel evidence. That's just the only thing. You're
Sure,
asking
sure.
who gets sacrificed, and that's not quite the argument. Right?
And your argument is that the SMG is playing sacrificial ritual blood orgies. What about state level restrictions on sacrificial orgies?
Well, the only state level restrictions on sacrificial orgies are ones that are mirrors of federal restrictions because of those federal restrictions.
What
You won't
evidence
find
do you
like
read
a
on that
Michigan
question?
coded state
Right.
law that's like you can't have a sacrificial blood.
Like in Georgia, you can't commit, like two men, it's illegal for two men to commit acts of sodomy. Like, how do you counteract that with federal law?
Well, as Michael said, those state laws are a mirror of federal law.
What, okay.
Right, and like there may be some sort of like jurisdictional discrepancy, but that's kind of solved somewhere else, right?
Okay.
So too often case.
Their 1AC is an attempt to rehabilitate civil society intercollisions made by advocating the performance of self-reflective criticism, context to confirm the resolution there, solution, operation, expansion, judicial interpretation of the resolution, and act burdens as the advocate the resolution outside of interrogation or argument is simply your judgment should not be an affirmation of the resolution, but rather the best alternatives of rough draft collected depends on the subsequent debate via universal negation, truly unflinching paradigmatic analysis that offers no compromise, no middle ground with affirmation of the resolution, rather than vote to affirm the resolution, instead to vote nay to universally negate the resolution, represent the unflinching analysis that we'll get to later on, and the evidence only a selective interrogation and hierarchies embedded in the resolution of partiality used for self-promotion specifically. They leave in place the boundaries of competition which they can use against the other in this round. That's us. And the actors are radical, just radically naive. They claim to be so different from judicial practice, only match a codependent relation with debate, hierarchy, propping up the very system they claim to tear down while seeking awards for the community. They to stand apart from struggle while political debate is not benign. It can be a tool of co-option or for the corrupted elitist debate institution. Their institution has been catered to, the critique has been tolerated and allowed to exist in the form of tolerable lyrical indignation. Fashion despite their radical contradiction. Didn't read that statement against policy and such a public license are and will be left in the impression of here. Professionalized code of discourse is a problem that critiquers rely on their performance and only to attack the debate institution and willing to disengage from the whole critique hierarchy, which gets them chopped out to the CIA and critical academic echelons. The only reason which explains their reluctance to attack the debate institution seriously intended to stress that the policy bastion is because the institution has put them on a pedestal and made them feel important through sentimental sardine tricks. They get all the credential power crews and all their impacts are not unique and frankly deny the only purpose served by the advocacy. Now is a problem system of thought and argumentation. They think they are rallying against the Strobin one. The whole state is not less approach to the critique can serve more of a function of policing alternative debate forms and activist experience than is a function of this. The whole charade of critiques and continue intimidation with the body of reform is correct. The political imagination of Earth's critique community within the debate that will hardly ever question the competitive format or demonstrate imagination to create new forms. Instead, they use their genius to only create new forms of argument under the way of the competitive format and are all challenging the format itself as a superior critical advocacy position stroke. One, the format question is seriously trouble the kind of intellectual inquiry will become the spark of creation of new debate, social movements, how can critical inquiry jump the gap from abstract intellectual function to radical realms of creativity and challenge more than forms of content and individual speech. How can we find this question of the political imagination more interesting and find most pertinent the problems of post-critical community of academic debate, which has done little to create new forms and has problems that are more to strengthen the competitive format in particular. Next one. Shadow slavery created the human subject in the Eastern West and gave rise to the ontological category of the human, which is defined through existential concerns, wars, peace, conflicts, and resolution. This ontology is one that the slave does not have access to because the slave is the non-human, is defined by its vulnerability to the violent peace of the world via policing and enslavement. The idea of debating whether or not the African ought to be enslaved never materialized itself because the black was already positioned outside of humanity is concerned. The anti-black paradigm of the world already enforced humanity that the black is an object to be accumulated and traded / made fungible because Wilson and 10. Without this gratuitous violence of all that marks everyone experientially until the late Middle Ages, when it starts to bite the black ontology, the so-called great mainstream discourse of modernity, political discourse predicated on frames of suffering whose constituent elements of exploitation and alienation might have developed out of slavery, did not simply reach or tells the ontology that African also created a human out of culture just in Eastern Europe, East and West, could not have precluded itself without the simultaneous production of that walking structure which became known as black through shadow slavery. The world gave birth to coherence of both the joys, domesticity, and struggles of political discontent with the joy and struggles of the humans woven out before it murdered the black, forging a symbiosis between the political ontology of humanity and social death of blacks. And what does it mean to ontologically to be capital B, black and little black satisfaction, the first of modernity's quoting and terror, the churning vertigo of the slave ship to constitution to the human. The African called black is a power metaphysically and socially dead without tradition or contingency. They're black, totally powerless, alienated from kinship structure and generally dishonest. Woods and 7. The materiality of the colonized subject cannot be found in labor, exploitation, national repressive violence provides the material of the colonial subject, historical circumstances, and B, blocked and thickness by non-recognition fits the position of the enslaved means that consciousness is predicated on violence. To be human is to be free. The emergent Western minority came about through slavery, one of significant meanings of African slave chambers that violence against the black body is the precondition for the formulation of the modern bourgeois state. The modern world is formed with first sadistic aggression towards black. This sadistic aggression is structural because without the white world would not be white. The official station against the violence is bourgeois democracy, cultural church, and structural violence is the impermissible knowledge and awareness of the necessity of black social death for white civic life must be repressed to do terror violence that this now also reveals the double movement at our heart of the colonial project ontology. Once it is finally admitted, its living existence by the wayside does not permit us to understand the being of the black man. For not only must the black man be black, he must be black in relation to the white man ontology. Rules semantic field structure not simply by white supremacy is held together by anti-black solidarity. And plans to link state of capture debate of positionality of black destruction of civil society and peaceful reforms underwritten by supplemental anti-blackness. Wilson and 10. There's something organic to black positionality that makes it essential to destruction of civil society. There's nothing before or in this statement the Torah for one can just say as well as say the claim the other way around. There's something organic to civil society that makes it essential to the destruction of the black body. Blacks is the positionality absolute their relation for non-abandonment in the face of civil society, and therefore cannot be established or be established through hegemonic individuals. Blacks cannot become one of civil society's ministry part of black citizenship or black civic obligation or oxymorons, even radical social movements for close upon the sexual demands and endless antagonism to prison slave in waiting. Such social movements, rhetorical structures, and political desire are underwritten by supplemental anti-blackness. The black call for contingent freedom and democratic participation perfect slavery. The only option for the slave is to burn everything down in this unethical world, cleansing violence, just like that of the Haitian Revolution is the only path to gratuitous freedom and farly informed. What is to be done 200 years ago when the slaves in Haiti rose up? They have necessity, burned everything. The bird said to me, go flesh, so that at the end of the war, which was charged at the slaves, burned everything because everything was against them. Everything was against the slaves. The entire order that was allowed to follow the entire order in which they were positioned, the doors, the census states, every plantation, everything the slaves were, everything. Yes, but unfortunately, they only burned everything in Haiti. This was the greatest and most successful revolution in the history of the world. But the fight across the borders was the great tragedy of the 19th century. The slave power that is in the United States today threatens the entire world. The death has become the slaves of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Those with nothing but their chains to lose. But if they would be free, they would escape slavery, win the entire world. The slaves cold and free, thus living can never be until the slave bursts apart and die. The slaves begin as death, not as children. And death is not a beginning, but an end. There's no progress and no exit from the undiscovered country of the slave, or so it seems. We are trained to think that through a process of progress narrative, a grand narrative, the greatest narrative that takes up from slavery. There's no up from slavery. The slave only becomes a perfect slave at the end of the timeline. On the other Conditions of total juridical freedom is only under condition of freedom of bourgeois legality that slave can perfect itself as a slave by freely choosing to bow down before its master. The slave presents itself as offering comparative equal rights and system and works in the plantation system of property, a plantation system of laws and plantation. These plantations all part of the state system hierarchy produce white over black, and only that continually the slave perfects itself as through with its prayer for equal rights. The plantation system will not commit suicide, so the slave as stated above has no one by not knowledge of the fact the slave finds his way back from the undiscovered country only by burning down every plantation. Our centralization of blacks launches a project of absolute dereliction in the spirit of intelligibility of society uses smart cultural difference in program and complete disorder by which revolutionary war can be continuously waged, Will said in 07. The black American subject did not generate historical categories and entitlements, sovereignty, and immigration. From the record, we are off the map with respect to cartography and chart civil society semiotics. We have a past but not a heritage. It also places hegemony in a structural impossible position because our presence works fast in the grammar of hegemony threads it with incoherence. No other body function, the imaginary, symbolic, the real, so complete as repository, complete disorder as the black body. Blackness is the site absolute dereliction at the level of the real force in its magnetizing of bullets. The black body functions as a map of gratuitous violence with civil society is possible. Blackness in America generates no categories for chromosome and history, no data or categories of immigration, sovereignty at the level of the imaginary. Whoever says rape, says black, whoever says prison, says black, is condition, possibility, and gesture resistance of function. As a negative dialectic of politics, the refusal to affirm a broken, complete disorder, one embraces disorder, its coherence, one politics are to be underwritten, desire to take down this country, few so-called radicals desire to be embraced and elaborated, but the disorder incoherence of blackness is a state of political movements, and the United States is marked by the very Negro phobogenesis. Gee whiz, if only black race should be more coherent, maybe not coming on coalition today, prefer to remain inorgasmic, and in the face of civil society, they remain coalitions operating within the logic of civil society, function less than revolutionary promises, crying out, so narrative the black antagonists, the black subject vexes with the incoherence of civil war that reclaims blackness as a politically enabled side of absolute dereliction to the scandal that rents civil society and sunders the black spectre waiting in the wings of endless antagonism that cannot be satisfied via reforms or reparations that but must nonetheless be pursued to the death. One, the act doesn't do anything. They don't reduce restrictions on, they don't reduce state restrictions on blood orgies. They also don't solve non-sacrificial orgies, and they also leave restrictions on blood orgies in general. And additionally, they work towards the accumulation. The ballot becomes the energy. They continue accumulating ballots so that they can progress in 2 hour rounds that necessarily means that the act can't solve. When debate is a homogenized space that will always close in on energy, there's always an af and next side, which means that there is already a homogenization of that energy which is pushed towards and celebrating expedition for its own sake is nonsensical and non-transgressive. Wall no 4. Celebration transgressive for its own sake is simplistic. We are left without an ethos, a sharp rupture. This rupture subserved the very idea of achieving a central reckoning with transgression, heterogeneity, expedition would seem inimical to their spirit.
Conditional, can you classify offense into them?
Like, can you use our answers on one flow to create links for the other flow?
It depends what your answers are, still.
For sure, I guess.
Okay, so your first criticism is the mediation criticism, right? That you should vote negative to destroy debate. Okay, why should we destroy debate?
Because all the things you're talking about are embodied within debate, right? The case arguments you're talking about, how energy is stored in debate, all these claims, these larger theoretical claims you're making, like debate is civil systems. Debate is those spaces.
What spaces?
Those spaces of accumulation of energy that's storing up to try to, lead to
Okay, so why shouldn't we vote act to destroy debate since everything that you criticize
because
in your
act
argument?
already, even the plan that you have is an affirmation, right, of the resolution of debate as some sort of redeemable space.
But
supposedly self-reflective
it
criticism.
seems to me like you're assuming that nature is true of our affirmation in order to prove that that's the nature of our affirmation. If the judge always votes affirmative.
That's what we have working
Well,
with the
I know
1AC.
that that's your assertion. My
1AC
question is, what if the judge always votes affirmative and destroys debate in the exact same way?
No, it doesn't, because
Why?
that means that when he votes aft, all that happens, that ballot goes to the tab room. All the tab room sees is affirmation of the
Same thing with
resolution.
voting negative every time.
Yes, negation of the resolution. That's our argument, that the
Sure,
resolution
but
is
the
messed
judge
up.
writes down in the BOD, I voted F to always affirm the
Yes, and
resolution or
negating-
destroy debate.
Always
Same
affirming the
thing.
resolution is not good. Our
Negating
argument, the
hold on.
resolution isn't good.
Hold on, I have a
Well, that's a separate
I have a
argument.
question.
If your argument is
That's-
only that the resolution isn't good, then.
It's
How-
not
I
only
have
the
a
resolution
question.
isn't good.
I have
Right,
a
well, we're
question.
asking about the parts that aren't that part of the argument.
How
So-
does negating the resolution destroy debate? Like, even if negatives won every time, if people still continue to
It
show.
destroys competition. The internal links to that is about destroying competition, but the argument that you might make on the presentation, vote ask every time, is not gonna solve, because that means that the resolution
So
itself
we
is
should
not
just destroy
problematized.
competition, not the debate.
It's both.
It's both.
It's a,
Competition as
Okay.
a part of the debate spirit.
Let's talk about your Wilderson argument. Your alternative, you read this piece of Farley evidence, right?
Yeah.
How exactly do we do the alternative?
The question of, like, well, of course, we don't have a bunch of flamethrowers going around.
Right, obviously, so I'm just
It's
wondering.
like, he uses the metaphor because even this idea of modernity isn't like something that's tangible or like reason, and all these ideas that come out of modernist thought
Of
aren't
course,
tangible.
in some
but-
ways it's unknowable, right? So,
What?
since you don't have, like, there's
Somewhat.
aspects of modernity. Well, I'm not saying so what,
I mean,
so-
they are noble.
Since you don't have flamethrowers, though, can I just real quick for clarification, you're not gonna be making the argument that you're actually performatively burning everything down, right?
Because we don't have.
I don't think we're preclude ourselves from that argument.
Yeah, I just said that we're talking about the education end as well.
Sure, of course you
We're
can
saying that we
educate
don't
us
have,
about that, but your argument isn't that you literally can effectuate that outcome through the ballot, right?
that we can literally affect.
If you can literally burn everything down to the
If you win
judgment.
certain aspects of universal negation, I don't understand why it's not that. If you win that.
We are not talking about being,
So
we're
is
not in
your-
the Haitian Revolution.
So you
We're not.
can, just to be clear though, so the argument about universal negation can also be the alternative to Wilderson. You're saying that an aspect of this is to break debate.
It's about, our argument is about rejecting civil society writ large. So if we win that debate is part of civil society, and we have a strategy to disrupt the competitive aspect of debate and the hierarchy of debate, then I don't understand why that isn't the actualization of burning down debate.
Okay, so just to be clear, sorry, just go,